Hello, everyone. Yes, I am back here with a full-length album review. It's been a little while, and I know I keep returning and saying that, oh, I'm going to start doing these more frequently. And then I continue to be kind of more sporadic with my uploads. Unfortunately, I mean, I just have to be honest. It's probably going to continue to be somewhat like that. I do have, well, there are some albums coming out this month, finally. It's been a little bit of a slower autumn in terms of music that I've been interested in reviewing having coming out. And there are some end of the year lists that I am starting to work on, but more importantly, end of the decade lists. So you will be seeing content around that. And I have a few other things I'm working on. As we move into 2020, as much as my album reviews might not be still that frequent like they once were, there's going to be other videos, other content that's still somewhat music related, but a little bit different. But don't worry, there still are going to be album reviews. But as far as going back and doing older albums and reviewing those, that is going to be pretty few and far between. There are still albums I want to talk about on this channel that I have not talked about. But a lot of them are very kind of there are a lot of artists that I'm not entirely sure I'm going to get many views on, which concerns me a little bit. Not that I do this reviews, but it's just like, I don't know if anyone's interested in watching the video I make on that artist. So I'm just, trying to space things out. And right now I'm covering an artist who is very indie and pretty under the radar, but is someone who's actually starting to really, I think, gain somewhat of a, I don't want to use the word cult, but somewhat of a really strong, fervent fan base who's making him and his music actually a lot more well-known than I once thought. And I am talking about the Canadian electronic artist, though he is part of a band. He has, his drummers and he has his producers that he works with on keyboard and whatnot. But Robert Alfons is the male vocalist who is the epicenter of this group called Trust. Now, the band used to be called Trust with a U before Maya of this other electronic band of Astra. This woman Maya left the group, and so the band name changed from Trust to TR/ST. It still is pronounced Trust in interviews, so I'm going to refer to Robert and his music as Trust. It's a very strange band name. Again, it's like a little like, what are you listening to? Have you heard of TR/ST? Yeah, it's unpronounceable, and it's like, what does that mean? This is why, sometimes with bands, I'm just like, it's so hard for me to get into some of their whole aura and concept because I'm just like, I can't get past your band name. What does it mean? But Trust is a duo or a group that has been around for quite some time, but the guy behind all of it is this Canadian electronic artist named Robert Alfons. I believe his actual real last name is Hilly. So Robert Hilly is his real name, but for whatever reason, he goes by a Robert Alfons. I don't know all the details around that, but then of course, his music is under the label of Trust. So we have a new album, but it's actually two albums that form one that I'm going to be talking about today. The project in total is called The Destroyer, and within 2019, Trust has released Part 1 or Volume 1, which had 8 songs on it, and Volume 2, which has another 8 songs, within 6 months of each other. So we got Volume 1 back in April of this year, and then Volume 2 just came out on November 1st of this year, so just about a little over a week ago. And once I heard Volume 2, that was when I realized that I wanted to cover Trust on this channel more openly. And when I realized that, I will also probably have to cover Volume 1 because they are part of the same body of work, as he has said, but they're just given, in 2 parts to sort of, as he says, spread out the influx. 'Cause it's 16 songs that can be a lot to give at once. And I mean, there are many, many artists who will gladly give us 16 songs or more at once. But sometimes, less is more. And, if we spread things out, we get, a longer, honeymoon period with the music. It's like, not all at once. It's not so instant. We get this sort of spread out story. So I really understand, and I'm very appreciative of him doing this in terms of that choice. And I will say this, Volume 2 is what's really getting me more excited about talking about this body of work. Volume 1 is great. I listened to a bunch of those songs back when they came out in the spring. but I didn't think I was necessarily going to cover it on this channel. I didn't feel a certain type of way enough. But once I heard volume two, I sat through and listened to it. I was like, okay, okay, I gotta make some form of a video on this, even if it's not so in my traditional form of going track by track and really dissecting every lyric. Because I gotta be honest with you, a lot of the songs, particularly on volume two, do not even have lyrics on Genius yet. They are, an independent group. They're not so mainstream. So a lot of songs do not have confirmed lyrics put to them yet. So there's lyrics on almost every song. There are one or two instrumentals, but I cannot decipher what some of those lyrics are. One of the distinct things about Robert's vocal is that it is very quiet in a lot of places. And it is, I've been trying to think what the right word would be to describe his vocal on his sound and his music. But it is I would say strained might be a good way to describe his vocal. And that's not necessarily like a criticism. And his vocal is very unique. It's very moody, it's dark, it's haunting. There's a bit of a growl to it. He really leans into his lower register, even though, it's interesting. I mean, I've heard him speak. He has actually a higher pitched voice, but you wouldn't know it listening to some of his music because he has this very strong, lower register baritone sounding voice in a lot of his songs. But he can also really reach into his higher register and his falsetto and expand his range. And there are songs where I think he leans a little bit more into a style of singing that might be a little bit more familiar to the listener. And then there are songs where his singing is like halfway between singing and somewhat muttering. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily like a bad critique. It's just an observation. If you take the first song, Colossal, off of volume one, just as an example, in amongst this sort of ambient, spluttery, sputtering electronica, he's sort of like half just kind of, it sounds like he's reciting some sort of dark curse or something at you. Like it's very ominous, his delivery, and it's not necessarily melodic. And sometimes his vocals don't necessarily follow the melody line, and sometimes they do. It's a very, it feels sometimes like his music is a lot of stuff being thrown at a wall and just seeing what sticks. And I have that, with a lot of the artists who make very experimental music. I have that criticism of a lot of their stuff. I have an ear for melody. I have an ear for really good chord progression and chord structures, really good harmonies. And I do feel like a lot of these alternative indie artists don't really worry about that result. They just sort of put what they feel they want to put out. And it's sort of like an abstract painter who's, doing a Jackson Pollock compared to, a Salvador Dali realist painting. They're both abstract and they're both expressive, but one is very loose and freeform, and the other is like tight and sort of trying very much to achieve something that is like very pleasurable to the eye and amazing. Not to say that abstract expressionism is not amazing or pleasing to the eye. I'm just saying there's nothing recognizable that your ear can easily latch onto. That's a critique I have of all alternative electronic experimental music. So Trust is not unique in that regard in any way. But actually, Trust does, on this record, particularly in Volume 2, really stretch those more kind of traditional chords and melodies in a beautiful way. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this record so much. The second song on Volume 1 is Gone, which was actually the lead single off of this whole project. Well, actually, technically, it wasn't the lead single. The lead single was actually Bicep, which is also another song from Volume 1, which was released way back in the summer of 2017, before anything had been announced that there was a new album coming. But Gone was like the first song we got when we knew the album was coming. Does that make any sense? It was like announced with the album pre-order. Gone is one of my favorite songs of this whole project. I mean, it is soaring, it is mysterious, it's triumphant. The way the chorus kind of moves and changes throughout the melody line, with Alphons crooning this very like haunting sort of soul-filled vocal. Like it's just this exquisite combination that I hadn't actually really expected to hear off of his music. I was like, this is a lot more pop sounding than I was expecting, and it's much more accessible. And yet it still has this distinct feel to it that makes it so unique. And I really recommend, if you had to listen to one song off of this whole body of work, Gone would be the one I would ask you to listen to. It's one of the few songs we do have lyrics for. You spit out the life, it consumed the isle of disaster. Places gone for you could never decide. Days like this, I'm slime. I am motionless in the bedroom. I love that lyric. I need it to come alive. Barely love all this time. Gone, it's gone. It's gone, it's gone, he repeats in the chorus. There is a real heaviness and darkness to not only the sonics of all of his music, but in particular the lyrics. There is something very mournful and tragic about the way he depicts, heartbreak or depression or a feeling of insecurity. All of that speaks through his lyrics, but it's also vaguely constructed and indirect and disguised. On top of the fact that it's hard to even make clear his actual words and diction through the way he sings, and sometimes the synth work and the production overwhelms his vocal to make him feel almost not like he's center stage anymore. And this is all deliberate, the way his music is so kind of intertwined with this emotional sort of outcry or this feeling that is very much, you can tell so much more about the actual production behind it than his actual vocals. You wouldn't really hear Robert Alfons sing anything acoustic. You wouldn't necessarily hear him sing something where it's very much just his voice, because that's not the kind of artist that he is. His voice is meant to be paired with all of this this lush, icy production that is so rich and so well layered and textured. There's so much to pinpoint and listen to with all the electronica. They're meant to be together. They're not meant to be set apart. On Unbleached, he sort of really kind of wails at you. It's a little bit more of an aggressive song in terms of the instrumental. Whereas on Bicep, there's like more of a kind of sexy undertone to it, the hushed vocals, the whispering, and the way the song progresses. It has a feeling of, when you think of a Bicep, like a workout track, something you'd listen to while you're pumping iron. There is a little bit of that industrial electronica underneath those two songs. On Grouch, we have this much more of like what I would consider a traditional pop song. I mean, it's probably the closest to like Gone, a very accessible sort of melody with like a dance break section. It has almost like an Olivia Newton-John feel to it, like an 80s like synth line in the beginning. Like it's very dated in its sound in certain ways, but I don't have a problem with that. I love that title, Grouch, because it really does kind of give into this idea of like Robert himself, but also the character and the emotions. Like this is like a grumpier kind of character who's just dark and emo and like has their hood up and doesn't want to do with anything. Life and all its lows, can you heal me? In the darkness, no one knows. Round and round we go. Like so many of his songs, it's a celebration of darkness. That's no other better way to put it. He pens very sort of maudlin tales of woe and misery. Think of Edgar Allan Poe. Like his songs feel like that poem, The Raven, come to life. Like a lot of them. Or think of like some really dark like vampires, like Dracula. Like his music, it definitely has like a Transylvania kind of feel to it in a lot of ways. Some hooded figure in the night, casting spells, sucking blood. Oh yeah, no, it's very sexy, all of this too, and it doesn't hurt that Robert Alfons is a very very good looking guy. So like the whole package is like aesthetically, very goth. Even though he doesn't like being called goth, I can understand why a lot of artists don't like that label. It's very, much giving off those vibes, whether you like it or not. But there is hope in his music. There is. Control Me is interesting because it's this one moment on the first part of this record where the sound opens up and is lighter and it's free form. It's a soaring kind of electronic. It's grander. It's a grander sound. The reverb is stronger. It's not so punctuated and aggressive. And unfortunately, I can't find lyrics for this song, which is really frustrating. But I mean, what I can sort of hear is this, yearning to sort of succumb to someone who has this power over you. Maybe it's a romantic partner, or it's something, faith wise, or it's this idea. Maybe it's succumbing to a demon, possibly, and yet you're sort of making it out to be this salvation. Because there is something about this song that feels like it's cathartic, that it's like open and like I said, it's esoteric and soaring in that way. And at the same time, when you consider his vocals and his lyrics, it's probably about something pretty dark. One of the opening lyrics that I can deduce, though it's again hard for me to really translate what I hear, is starting with no paranoia, starting with no care at all. I fly in circles just to forgive that there are cracks in the mold. Yeah, and then it loses me. At the very start, the sound of medicine calls. Like I can't. I need the lyrics, but unfortunately, there's just no official lyric sheet on this song. But calling out for something, calling out for something to liberate you, and also kind of experiencing what liberation might feel like. Not having paranoia. I don't know. The last track, Wake With, I also love because it's this mid-tempo sort of vibey kind of UFO sounding electronica mixed with a melody that at once, as I said, it's hard to determine, is this a mournful melody or is this a celebratory melody? And without me being able to really figure out what the lyrics are, because it was not an official single, you are left to just kind of process the actual pure sounds and the key changes and the major and minor aspects of it and kind of create your own story, because it is very abstract. But all in all, volume one feels, I don't know. Volume one just feels like it's a lot poppier and it's got a lot more aggressive, pulsating rhythmic sections to it. But volume one feels very much, I don't want to say the prelude is the right word. Volume one feels very much like the collection of singles, I guess you would say. Whereas volume two feels like the sort of more deep cuts that he wanted to kind of put on their own, to which I think could be interspersed, very beautifully with the songs of volume one. But volume two is softer and much more sparse in parts. It's much, much more haunting and dark. If volume one was dark, wait till you hear volume two and there's a lot of piano, which is something that's not at all in volume one. Some beautiful piano melodies. The opening track, Enduring Chill. I mean, talk about a song that sounds just like what the title describes. When we enter in with, his soft vocal over we have these building strings coming in, and his vocals, for the once, really standing out without a whole lot going on. You know how I told you about we won't get acoustic vocals from Robert? Well, this is probably the closest we will get at the very beginning. Unfortunately, we don't again have lyrics for a lot of these songs, which makes it a lot harder for me to talk about the meaning behind them. But I do hear this repeated phrase, what I believe is handle this waste time, this wasted time. I almost hear it as waistline, which could be interesting as well. There's a lot that makes me question the thematic content when I consider that one lyric. But when this song sort of opens up to you, and it's like I said, it's this understated moment of sheer icy cold lamentation. There's really no other way I can put it. I mean, there's this really cutting instrumentation on this track. But all I can do is just close my eyes and imagine the landscape. And to me, this part, it reminds me so much of a winter landscape, but maybe not with snow on the ground or just a little bit of snow somewhere north. It makes me think of my seasonal depression, and it makes me think of this feeling of there is no getting out of this. Like, I've made my bed and now I need to lie in it. There's something so submissive about the way he delivers these lyrics on this song that you can tell it's like I don't want to say I've given up, but it's like that kind of like surrender yourself, give in, just let yourself wallow in this pure sadness and this pure depressive state. And It's so beautiful, which you might think, "Oh gosh, that's so tragic," but, like, when you really, like, experience it and you've experienced depression, and I know that Robert probably has, and I know that I have, this speaks to me so much right now in the state that I feel in my head where I'm at, where I feel as though I have, through the choices I've made, caused myself to be stuck in this deep, dark hole. And the most I can do is just paint like beautiful imagery down there and just sort of like let the world just continue to like pass me by as I just sort of waste away. It's a very depressing feeling. But you've got to channel that kind of feeling and emotion into beautiful, raw, earnest art. Otherwise, that is never going to resolve itself. And so having this music, it's like the perfect gift for me right now because, and that's really why I wanted to talk about it. There's another song called Core, which is lowercase COR. Have no idea what that means, but it's one of the piano tracks on this record, and it has the exact same energy to it for me. I think a little bit dystopian. It makes me think of like abandoned factories and like that like depressing skyline you see in like the winter, like warehouses and like empty sheds and like lumber yards and like some industrial buildings, and it's like all dark and there's just all the leafless trees look like skeletons against this like icy blue gray sky, and you're just staring out the window at your car and you're just like, life is meaningless. Life is cold and empty and like meaningless. This is the exact kind of energy and feeling I get from both of these songs. And although I prefer the first half of Core to the second actually gets um, lighter in its instrumentation, which was a bit of a about face for where the song I felt like was heading. I do love the pulsing under rhythm of that electronic bass as it like rumbles in the background, sort of like thunder, as a storm approaches. And then it like suddenly turns into a slightly lighter sounding airier moment when he actually provides the vocals. Again, we don't have the lyrics for them. All of this, like these two songs in particular, there's another instrumental called Shame, which actually, Shame carries a similar sort of melody line to Core, except it's even more sparse and it's just really about the piano, and there are no vocalizations on that song. So this low, mournful moment. The track Darling is this ominous, like low piano chord repeated as he sort of, like I said, goes into that sort of more vampire-like vocal as he's very low and brooding. Okay, but we can't not talk about the two standout singles, Iris and Destroyer. Let's talk about Iris. This song really captured my attention. I heard it over the summer. It was the first song released off of Volume 2, although, again, not technically the first song, but it was the first single officially. The song The Destroyer, the namesake of this album, was actually released back in 2017, like I said, way before this album was announced. Iris reminds me a lot more of his older music. Trust's first album that came out in 2012, which was self-titled, had this very sort of electro dreamwave feel to it, and it was like at once very goth and dark, but at the same time it was like dreamlike. It was light at the same time, and Iris is playing on all of those strengths. There's this pulsating, synth that is just so gutting. It's like violent, this song, in some ways. Now I've lost this feeling, I'm thinning out. Unnecessary, you'll always care. Convinced to save them, we stay in the back. Unnecessary whenever. We move down the bar, all warnings for the night, then disassembled hearts. Sigh. And we get into the chorus. Show me again, shame takes hold. Was lovely to stay, and now jump straight to the start. Shameless hope. Was lovely to stay. Post chorus. Oh, right and slow, down and low, right and slow. Now all of us want to see you smile. Now, I can't help but think about, hookups when I hear the lyrics to this song. I do think that that is the inspiration behind it, these sort of one night stands where it's like quick glances into someone's eyes, iris, and, you want it to last longer, but you know that it's probably going to just be a one night thing. Jump straight to the start, shameless hope. I always have hope that this will continue. We move down the bar, all warnings for the night, then disassembled hearts sigh. I think that that lyric probably summarizes the song for me the most. Um, but the dark wave undertone of this song is just infectious. I guarantee that this will have you feeling a certain kind of way. It's sexual, it's dark, it's broody, it's something you can dance to. It's I don't know. I don't. It very much captures October and November for me, like those 2 months. It's got Scorpio energy. I don't know how else to describe it, but it does feel like a vampire, like a Dracula singing it in his shrouded castle, like with like moonlight shining through and like this pale blue. It's like really like visual for me. I don't know how else to describe his music, but like I just get so much imagery from it. The paintings, by the way, that were done. The first album has like the first volume has like a photo shoot cover of him suspended in this body of water. But the second cover is a painting that was done by this one artist. And he also did paintings for the singles Iris, The Stain, and The Destroyer. And they look like X-rays, like they're very like ink stainy, but they almost are figural, but not quite. So it's very abstract, leaving this haunting sort of residual imagery, very much like what you would think like from a Polaroid or something. There's just so much brooding energy that's coming through that is so ghostly about these songs. Like I said, they're scary almost, and they're so sexual at the same time. Oh my goodness, it's so the energy that I'm in right now in my life. Um, the Destroyer, oh my gosh. I mean, one of the most iconic hooks on this record for sure. The chord production is probably the most accessible we're going to get from him ever. I'm the destroyer of everyone. Rest assured after hours. Deliver the blood from your eyes. Give me the blood from your eyes. My spine is shaping hurt, my spine erasing time. The way it feels, but nothing burns. Years of room yearn to moon, you were right. I mean, very abstract lyricism, very hard to decipher what kind of meaning could possibly be derived. I'm not too worried about it. I definitely get a sense of a self destructive behavior that's repeated by someone who feels like they're stuck in an endless cycle of self sabotage of themselves, of other people in their life. They feel as though, they can't escape this sort of like slow winding path of doom amongst for themselves. And it's a celebration of that. Like, I hate to say it, but with a lot of these songs, there is no happy ending. I think that's something I just have to acknowledge. These songs are for a specific state of mind, and they are speaking of a specific state of being that is not pretty. Like, there is no, I mean, the music's gorgeous. That's the happy ending of this. This intense pain and um, sadness births such beauty, but it's tragic beauty. That's really all I have to say about this. The Stain, although also I think a really strong moment on this record, falters a little bit for me in terms of the sonics. But again, I really do appreciate that song. And unfortunately, we do not have lyrics for The Stain either. So it's anyone's guess. There's sort of like a Bon Iver feel to this song. At once, he's like very sort of plodding in his delivery with no melody line. The stain in the water. That's what it sounds like he's saying. It sounds like he's some like wizard. And then it becomes like this airy, sort of long, prolonged, vocalization that's very mournful and in the back and muddled. Um, Slow burn. I think that describes the song perfectly. It's not really a song that's that memorable to me. It has, more what I've come to be accustomed to production and electronica from this band, and it's not really a song that stands out. It's a bit long and it's a bit sprawling, but I can see how it closes out the record. All in all, Volume Two, like I said, is just much more of it's much more indescribable for me. I mean, like I said, it's something that I'm trying to put words to, but I completely fail to, and I'm sorry. But Volume Two is just this tragic, beautiful expression of pain, and I don't know how else to describe it. But it much more kind of summarizes the feel of what the Destroyer is. Whereas Volume 1, although dark as well, is much more upbeat, and it feels almost more like a separate project. I got to be honest with you, these two projects, actually, I've never listened to them both together, don't necessarily feel like they're meant to be together. They do feel like they're separate things, but at the same time, I can see how they all do tie together in the theme of, darkness and overcoming that, and processing all of that. Again, I wish I could be more profound, but so much is left to the interpretation. He's very mysterious in interviews about what his songs mean. He doesn't give us a lot. Um, so, like I said, it is very much just looking at abstract art, and it's all about what do you feel when you look at it, and that cannot be conveyed with words. It really can't. Like I would be better off conveying these songs and the emotion they give me through a painting. Maybe that's how I should have done this review. Should have done a painting display of what these songs made me feel, and the painting and the colors that came to mind when listening to it, because that would probably do a better job of describing this music, because the words that are coming out of my mouth are not really doing it justice. um, Trust is an artist that I'm going to continually be interested in. He's got some great stuff under his belt. The first album, Bulb Form, oh my god, in love with that song. His work, and the reason why I got familiar with Trust, is because of Yona Lee, who was previously I Am I, Who Am I? They have a song called Harvest together on her album, Everyone Afraid to Be Forgotten. I actually saw them perform that song both together live in Brooklyn in 2018, which was amazing. So this is why Trust has come onto my radar. It's through Yona, and I can see how the two have a similar sort of style of abstract, haunting, melancholic, subtle, under your skin electronica. So it's, don't look for this, like, this is subtle under your skin music, and it's late night music too. It's very late night. That's all I have to say. But Volume 2, I prefer infinitely more to Volume 1. Volume 2 is really what I wanted to talk more about. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know what you thought about this record. What you thought of both parts. Do you prefer Volume 1? Do you prefer Volume 2? What are your favorite songs? I highly recommend checking out this artist if you have not. Especially if you're a fan of Yona Lee and you saw that they collabed and you were like, oh, I should check out that artist because I loved Harvest. That song sent me somewhere. And I was like, I need to check out this guy because his vocals, his production is something else like I've never heard before. And so that was why I was like, I need to make sure I check out his music. So made sure I needed to highlight his music on my channel. There's not probably a good chance that I'm going to review his first two records just because of, what I can get out here on this channel. It's just, I just don't have the oomph to do that, unfortunately. But I will be talking about a few more of his music, a few more songs of their music moving forward, because, songs may appear on your end lists and things like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you all so much for watching. Peace, love, and light. Bye.